What if I told you Columbus may not have been the first man to cross the Atlantic? 2 centuries before his voyage, a powerful African king might have sailed into the unknown, leading hundreds of ships toward a new world. This isn't a legend, it's a story whispered in old manuscripts, a story that challenges everything we think we know about exploration. And here's the catch. If you stay with me until the end, you'll discover how this forgotten tale changes the way we look at history itself. So, let's begin with the empire where this mystery was born. To understand this mystery, we need to step back into one of the most powerful kingdoms the world has ever seen, the Mali Empire. This was not a small or hidden place on the map. In the 14th century, Mali controlled vast lands across West Africa. It sat on rivers rich with gold, salt, and trade routes that connected Africa to Europe and the Middle East. At its height, Mali's influence stretched so wide that travelers from faraway lands wrote in awe about its wealth. And at the heart of this empire was its most famous ruler, Mansa Musa. You've probably heard his name before, often called the richest man in history. When he traveled to Mecca on his famous pilgrimage in 1324, he carried so much gold that he disrupted economies along the way. Everywhere Musa went, he left people stunned by the riches of Mali. But Musa's wealth isn't the focus of our story. What matters here is something he told in confidence to an Arab scholar named Al-Amari. When asked how he became king, Musa revealed a secret. He hadn't inherited the throne in the usual way. His rise was the result of something far stranger. He explained that the ruler before him had a dream far bigger than ruling Mali. That king wanted to know what lay across the endless ocean stretching westward. He wasn't satisfied with riches on land. He was obsessed with what could be found beyond the horizon. And in that obsession he did something bold. Something almost unbelievable. This sets the stage for one of the most daring voyages ever attempted, an African expedition into the Atlantic Ocean, 200 years before Columbus. But before we dive into the king's adventure, remember this, our only record of the tale comes from Musa's own words. And yet, his testimony has fascinated historians for centuries. What exactly did that mysterious king do? How did his obsession shape history? Stay with me. Because in the next section, we'll uncover the king's bold dream and the first steps he took toward the unknown. The story begins with a restless king. He ruled one of the richest empires on earth, yet he could not stop thinking about the ocean. Day after day he gazed westward, wondering what lay beyond the endless horizon. Gold and power at home were not enough. His heart was fixed on discovery. So he made a bold decision. He ordered ships to be built, stocked with food, water, and supplies for long travel. Then he gathered sailors and told them to follow the currents of the Atlantic until they found land, or until they could go no further. This was not a small experiment. It was an empire's resources being poured into a single daring mission. The fleet sailed into the unknown. Weeks passed. Months passed. And finally a single ship returned. Its captain gave a chilling report. He said the other ships had been pulled away by a powerful current, swallowed by the sea. He was the only one who managed to turn back. The king listened carefully. Instead of being discouraged, he became more determined. To him, the story of ships vanishing into the current was not a warning, it was a clue. The ocean was not empty. It was a pathway. If the current could pull ships away, then surely it led somewhere. That thought consumed him. And soon he made his final choice. He would not send others this time. He would lead the expedition himself. He handed over the throne to his trusted deputy, Mansa Musa, and prepared a fleet even larger than the first. Hundreds of ships filled with sailors, warriors, and supplies ready to chase a dream across the sea. This was no longer just an experiment. It was a king's destiny. And with that, he set sail into the Atlantic, and disappeared from history. But what happened after those sails vanished over the horizon? Could this voyage really have reached the shores of the Americas? In the next section we'll follow the story of the final voyage and the mystery that still lingers today. The king's second expedition was nothing like the first. This time he wasn't sending scouts. He was leading the charge himself. Imagine the scene, the harbor of Mali filled with hundreds of ships, sails rising like a forest of white against the sky. Some vessels carried warriors. Some carried supplies of grain and water. Others carried families, tools, and goods. And if they were preparing not just for a journey, but for a new beginning. Before leaving, the king placed Mansa Musa in charge of the empire. Musa was only meant to rule as a caretaker. But destiny had other plans. With everything set, the king gave the order. And the fleet moved west into the Atlantic. For the people left behind, it must have been a breathtaking sight. The ocean swallowed the ships one by one until nothing was visible but the horizon. And then silence. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. No messenger came back. No sail was seen returning home. The great king, along with his massive fleet, had vanished into the sea. It was then that Musa stepped fully into power. The throne that was meant to be temporary became his own. Later, when he told the story during his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, listeners were stunned. A ruler had abandoned one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the world, simply to chase the unknown. But here's the question that still lingers. Did they fail, lost forever in the depths of the Atlantic? Or did some of those ships actually reach distant shores? The records are silent. But the possibility has kept this mystery alive for centuries. In the next section we'll ask the big question, could it be true? Was such a voyage even possible with the ships of the 14th century? Let's explore the evidence. At first, the story sounds impossible. How could ships from the 1300s survive the open Atlantic? But when we look closer, the idea isn't as far-fetched as it seems. The ocean itself offers a hidden clue. Off the coast of West Africa, strong trade winds and powerful currents push steadily westward. If a fleet of ships left Mali and followed these forces, they would eventually be carried toward South America or the Caribbean. In other words, the sea could guide them like a highway. And this isn't just theory. In the 1970s, an explorer named Thor Heyerdahl built a boat using materials and designs from ancient Africa. He called it RA2. With nothing more than wind and current, the vessel sailed from Morocco all the way to the Caribbean in less than 2 months. If a modern team could do it with ancient technology, then a determined king with hundreds of ships could at least try. Of course, the ocean is not kind. Storms, hunger, or simple bad luck could have destroyed the fleet. But technically, yes, the journey was possible. The king's dream wasn't pure fantasy. So what does that mean? Could the Mali fleet have actually reached the Americas 2 centuries before Columbus? The truth is, historians remain divided. Some believe it's only a story Musa told. Others say there may be fragments of proof waiting to be uncovered. And that brings us to the next part of the mystery, the debate. Did the Mali king leave behind any trace in the New World? Or is this just a legend carried by the wind? This is where the story becomes even more fascinating and controversial. On one side, there are those who say the king's voyage left no trace. They argue that if a fleet of hundreds of ships had reached the Americas, there would be clear evidence in archaeology, language, or culture. And so far, mainstream history has not accepted any hard proof. But others see hints that the story might be true. They point to old claims about African influence on early American civilizations. For example, some believe that the massive stone heads of the Olmec people in Mexico resemble African features. Others mention plants like cotton or certain words in native languages that they argue could have crossed the ocean long before Columbus. The problem? Most experts strongly disagree. Archaeologists explain that the Olmec heads are clearly the work of indigenous people, not Africans. Botanists say there is no solid proof of plant exchange before 1492. Linguists also dismiss claims of shared languages as coincidence. In short, the so-called evidence is debated, and much of it is rejected by the academic world. Yet the mystery remains alive because Musa's testimony still stands. He had no reason to invent the story. His account to Al-Amari in Cairo was direct and personal. His predecessor left with a fleet and never came back. That is a fact we can't erase. So where does that leave us? The voyage may not be proven, but it is also not impossible. It sits in a gray space, half legend, half history. And in that space, the imagination takes hold. In the next and final section, we'll explore the legacy of this forgotten tale, and why it still matters today. Whether the king's fleet reached the Americas or not, the story itself is powerful. It tells us something about human curiosity, about the drive to explore even when the risks are enormous. This was a ruler of one of the wealthiest kingdoms in history, yet he was willing to leave it all behind to chase a question. What lies beyond the horizon? For Mansa Musa, the decision of his predecessor changed everything. Musa became king, and his wealth and fame spread across the world. But behind his glittering legacy lies the shadow of the king who vanished into the sea. Without that bold voyage, Musa's rise might never have happened. The tale also reminds us that history is far more complex than the simplified stories we often hear. Exploration did not begin with Columbus. Long before European ships crossed the ocean, others had the ambition and courage to try. The Mali King's expedition may be one of history's great mysteries. But it shows that Africa's role in global exploration cannot be ignored. And that's the reward of this story. It opens our eyes to forgotten chapters of the past. It forces us to ask, how many other adventures, how many other daring journeys have been lost to time? So the next time you hear the story of Columbus, remember this. 200 years earlier, sails may have already been rising from the shores of West Africa, chasing the same dream. A dream that still captures our imagination today.